Hello and welcome back to the channel. I've got to start this right now with a blunt, honest, and completely necessary question. What the absolute hell was that on Sunday night? If you are a Cleveland Browns fan, I need you to take a deep breath, find a chair, sit down. What you were forced to witness against the Pittsburgh Steelers wasn't just a loss. It wasn't a bad game. It was a public execution. It was a nationally televised funeral for a season that once held so much promise. A season that we were told, and we believed, would be different. The Cleveland Browns didn't just get beat, they humiliated themselves. They embarrassed generations of long-suffering, loyal supporters who have endured decades of this exact kind of gut-wrenching, soul-crushing pain. They stood on the biggest stage in professional sports under the brightest lights with the entire world watching, and they confirmed every single one of our worst nightmares about this organization's deep-seated, seemingly incurable dysfunction. And at the absolute undeniable epicenter of this catastrophic collapse stands one name, a name that will now live in Cleveland infamy forever. A name that has become synonymous with failure, with cowardice, with the death of hope itself, Dillon Gabriel. If you somehow managed to survive watching Sunday's unmitigated disaster, if you made it through the 4 quarters of abject misery without throwing your television out of a window and you're here now, then subscribing to this channel becomes mandatory because we're about to peel back the layers of this football atrocity layer by bloody layer. And I promise you, this goes so much deeper than one quarterback having a bad day. This is a story of complete and total organizational failure playing out for the entire world to see. This is a story of staggering incompetence, of a brewing locker room mutiny, of a fan base in open furious revolt, and of a head coach whose stubborn, misguided pride might be single-handedly destroying a championship caliber roster right before our very eyes. For every Browns fan out there craving the raw, unfiltered, unapologetic analysis that you will never ever get from a sanitized, soulless team press conference, this is for you. Buckle up because the truth is about to get very, very ugly. Let's start with the crime scene itself. The final box score, the statistics from Sunday's game against the Steelers tell a story so devastating, so utterly pathetic, it almost feels like a work of fiction, a cruel joke written by a Steelers fan. Dillon Gabriel, the man entrusted to lead this high-powered offense, attempted over 50 passes. 50. Let me say that again, so the sheer mind-numbing absurdity of it sinks into your soul. 50 desperate, panicked, hopeless heaves into the night sky in a futile attempt to salvage an unsalvageable performance. 50 times he dropped back, looked downfield, and chose failure. And what was the final pathetic result of those 50 laborious, painful to watch attempts? He barely, and I mean barely, scratched 220 yards, 0 touchdowns, 0 explosive plays, 0 moments of inspiration, 0 moments of leadership, 0 anything that remotely resembled professional quarterbacking in the National Football League. Now, on the surface, his completion percentage might look respectable to someone who was blissfully unaware, someone who was lucky enough not to have watched the game and just glanced at the stats on their phone the next morning. But anyone with a functioning pair of eyes, anyone who witnessed the horror live as it unfolded, recognized the horrifying truth immediately. These weren't meaningful completions. This was a symphony of checkdowns, a grotesque ballet of dump-offs, and pathetic 3-yard completions on 3rd and 8. This wasn't quarterbacking. This was the systematic, methodical destruction of an entire offense, one surrendered play at a time. It was an exercise in pure unadulterated cowardice on the football field, broadcast in high definition for the entire country to see. He wasn't playing to win, he was playing not to make a mistake. And in doing so, he made the biggest mistake of all. He gave up, he surrendered, he waved the white flag on national television. The most humiliating part, the part that should make every single person in the Browns front office, from the owner down to the interns, sick to their stomach, is that the Pittsburgh Steelers defense wasn't even trying to be tricky. They weren't some strategic masterminds that night. They didn't disguise their coverages. They didn't throw complex exotic blitz packages at him that he couldn't decipher. They played straightforward, vanilla, too-high safety looks, practically laying out a welcome mat for the intermediate passing game. They were begging Dillon Gabriel, daring him to have the courage, the intestinal fortitude, the basic competence to throw the ball downfield, and he couldn't do it. Or perhaps even worse, a possibility even more damning, he wouldn't. The intermediate routes, the 10 to 15 yard plays that are the lifeblood, the very heart and soul of any functional NFL offense, were sitting wide open time and time again. Receivers were creating separation, finding soft spots in the zone, and practically waving their arms for the ball. And repeatedly, Gabriel Gabriel, with a clean pocket and ample time, chose the safer, cowardly option, checking it down underneath for a meaningless gain and effectively surrendering the drive before it ever had a chance to begin. He was a general who refused to send his troops into a battle they could win. By the fourth quarter, the game had devolved from a tragedy into a pure dark comedy. The Steelers defenders, the Browns' most hated rivals, were literally laughing between plays. That is not an exaggeration. That is not hyperbole. The broadcast camera footage captured their defensive backs smiling, pointing at each other, and openly mocking the pathetic, toothless state of Cleveland's offense. Think about that for a second. Professional athletes in the middle of a heated divisional game publicly ridiculing their opponents. When does that ever happen? It happens when the quarterback play becomes so utterly, so comprehensively pathetic that you can no longer even pretend to respect it. You have become a walking, talking joke. They weren't just beating the Browns, they were toying with them, humiliating them because they knew with absolute certainty that the man under center for Cleveland posed zero threat to them. As the game clock mercifully finally ticked down to 0, the sound of boos cascading down from the stands, Browns fans watched in a state of stunned disbelief that quickly curdled into pure, unadulterated rage. That rage then transformed into a social media explosion of historic proportions. Twitter, or X as it's now called, became ground zero for a city's collective primal scream. The memes arrived instantly, and they were merciless, brutal, and creatively savage. One viral post showed Gabriel's face crudely photoshopped onto a local high school's practice squad roster with the caption, "Finally found his appropriate level." Another compared his pathetic stat line to those of a litany of retired failed Browns quarterbacks, a list long enough to fill a phone book, demonstrating that even Brandon Weeden's most disastrous performances in Cleveland were somehow statistically superior. Let that sink in. Brandon Weeden. These weren't just a few angry fans venting in their basements after a couple of beers. These posts were getting thousands upon thousands of likes and retweets, multiplying exponentially every single minute, a digital wildfire of fury. The discourse turned absolutely savage. One particularly brutal tweet, which gained over 47,000 likes overnight, a number that's still climbing, simply stated, "We traded Joe Flacco for this. Start Sanders immediately before this season becomes completely irrevocably unsalvageable." Another long-suffering Browns supporter, his avatar a picture of a sad dog in a Browns helmet, wrote, "Dillon Gabriel isn't the answer. He's not even the question. He is the problem. He is the anchor actively, gleefully drowning this franchise." The reply section was a tidal wave of furious, passionate agreement. GIFs mocking Gabriel's constant checkdowns, showing him throwing a 3-yard pass on 4th and 20 were everywhere. Fan-made videos painstakingly edited to highlight all the wide-open receivers he missed. Downfield went viral within minutes. This wasn't your typical fan frustration after a tough loss. This was something different. This was a complete and total rejection of a player by the entire Cleveland community. It was a city rising up as one and screaming no more. And then, just when you thought it couldn't possibly get any worse, just when the embers of fan rage were glowing white hot, the national media personalities, the biggest names in sports, grabbed their buckets of gasoline and joined in on the public flogging. Colin Cowherd opened his Monday morning show looking directly into the camera with a look of pity and disgust and declared, "The Cleveland Browns have a legitimate potential franchise quarterback, a kid with real talent sitting on their bench, while Kevin Stefanski is actively, consciously choosing to destroy their season with a stubborn, misguided loyalty toward a player who is clearly and painfully overmatched." Then the king of the hot take, Stephen A. Smith, went absolutely nuclear. "This is coaching malpractice of the highest order," he screamed, his voice cracking with theatrical rage. Everyone watching that game, everyone with a functioning brain, everyone who has ever seen a football in their life, knows that Shedeur Sanders gives the Cleveland Browns a better chance to win football games. Everyone, yet Kevin Stefanski refuses to make the obvious change. Because why exactly? Is it pride? Is it stubbornness? Is it some dark, twisted organizational politics we don't know about? Meanwhile, their entire season, the hopes of an entire city, are circling the drain at lightning speed. Skip Bayless, a man who rarely agrees with Stephen A. on anything, a man who would argue with a stop sign, was nodding his head vigorously in agreement. I've watched Shedeur since his time at Colorado, Skip chimed in, leaning into his microphone. That young man possesses genuine NFL arm talent, a real leadership presence, and a competitive fire that you just can't teach. It's in his DNA. Meanwhile, Dillon Gabriel looks completely and totally overwhelmed, like a kid who wandered into the wrong stadium when he faces a legitimate NFL defense. This is not a complicated decision, people. It's football 101. You start your best quarterback, and the Cleveland Browns are proudly, stubbornly refusing to do that. The criticism wasn't just coming from the usual talking heads. The condemnation was universal. Even former players, guys who understand the nuance and difficulty of the game, were aghast. Robert Griffin III, a man who knows a thing or two about quarterback play, tweeted, "When your QB attempts 50-plus passes and generates barely 220 yards with 0 touchdowns against a division rival, something is fundamentally, systemically broken. The Cleveland Browns offense looked JV level tonight, unacceptable. But the most damning indictment of all, the message that should send a cold shiver down the spine of the Browns front office, came from another former Browns quarterback whose name we will diplomatically omit to protect him from organizational reprisal, who texted a local reporter a simple, chilling message. Everyone inside that building knows Shedeur should be playing. The coach is scared of admitting he made a mistake, and meanwhile the entire season is slipping away. Do not misunderstand the severity of this situation. This is not an overreaction. This transcends a single bad performance. This is a pattern. Dillon Gabriel has struggled consistently throughout this entire season. Opposing defenses, who are paid millions of dollars to identify weaknesses, figured him out weeks ago. His limitations are not just present, they are glaringly, painfully obvious. His processing speed is inadequate for the NFL level. His arm strength is marginal at best, limiting the playbook and making every downfield throw a prayer. His pocket presence is non-existent. He feels phantom pressure and bails on clean pockets. And his decision-making under pressure is highly, highly questionable. Yet the coaching staff, led by the supposedly brilliant Kevin Stefanski, continues to trot him out there week after week, expecting a different result. And what is the clinical definition of insanity again? That's right. Doing the same thing over and over and over and expecting a different outcome. The Cleveland Browns are living in a self-inflicted asylum of their own making. And here is where the complications intensify, where the story turns from simple on-field incompetence to a full-blown internal crisis, a potential mutiny, the locker room dynamics. Multiple sources with direct, intimate knowledge of the situation are describing a growing, palpable frustration among the players, a frustration that is quickly boiling over into outright anger. The offensive linemen, the big men who bleed and sweat and fight in the trenches, are reportedly exhausted from protecting a quarterback who refuses to utilize their efforts. They are winning their battles, creating time, forming a clean pocket, giving him a pristine platform from which to operate. And Gabriel is just dumping the ball off immediately, wasting their Herculean efforts. The receivers are running crisp, precise routes, getting open consistently downfield, creating the explosive play opportunities this offense desperately needs. And Gabriel is flat out ignoring them, choosing the path of least resistance and maximum safety over the aggression needed to actually win football games. One veteran receiver, a respected leader on the team, supposedly confronted his position coach after the game, his voice dripping with frustration. "Why am I even running deep routes? Why am I busting my gut for 40 yards if the quarterback won't even look, let alone throw the ball beyond 15 yards? But it's the defensive players who are absolutely justifiably furious, and they have every single right to be. Cleveland's defense played championship caliber football against Pittsburgh. They were magnificent. They held the Steelers' offense to under 20 points, a feat in today's NFL. They created multiple turnovers, giving their offense the ball in prime scoring position. They gave their offense short fields to work with time and time and time again. They did everything a championship defense is supposed to do. And Dillon Gabriel squandered every single one of those golden opportunities. The Browns' defense is watching their extraordinary game-winning efforts be completely and utterly wasted by an offense that is incapable of capitalizing, an offense that is actively sabotaging their hard work. The tension reportedly boiled over in the locker room after the game when one of the defensive captains, a man whose leadership is unquestioned, allegedly confronted Gabriel directly. Sources say heated words were exchanged, fingers were pointed, and teammates had to intervene to separate them before it came to blows. Coach Stefanski, of course, downplayed the incident publicly with his usual bland coach speak, but those inside the building confirmed that the tension in that locker room has reached a critical, potentially explosive level. The team is fracturing, and Dillon Gabriel is the fault line. But the most telling, most infuriating, most maddening aspect of this entire debacle is the looming, ever-present shadow of Shedeur Sanders. He is sitting on that sideline, helmet in hand, a picture of calm professionalism, watching this unmitigated disaster unfold week after week, knowing deep down in his soul that he could fix this. And his teammates know it too. They see him in practice every single day. They witness his effortless arm talent, the easy way the ball explodes out of his hand. They see his natural confidence, his innate leadership qualities, the swagger that great quarterbacks possess. They recognize that he represents the Cleveland Browns' best and perhaps only chance of winning, of salvaging this season from the brink of total collapse. Yet the coaching staff, for reasons that defy all logic and common sense, refuses to play him. Why? Is it organizational politics? Is it some stubborn pride over his draft position versus Gabriel's? At this point, nobody understands the reasoning anymore. It has become an act of self-destruction. Rumors are now circulating like wildfire that teammates are actively, though discreetly, campaigning for a quarterback change behind the scenes. Multiple veterans have supposedly approached Coach Stefanski privately in his office with the door closed, all but begging him to give Shedeur an opportunity to give the team a spark, a chance. The offensive coordinator, sources say, allegedly agrees, believing that Sanders gives the offense a far better chance of actually stretching the field and scoring points. Even the position coaches are privately acknowledging to players that Gabriel's limitations have become an insurmountable obstacle to success. Kevin Stefanski remains unmarried, a captain determined to go down with his sinking ship, publicly supporting Gabriel despite the mountain of irrefutable evidence suggesting he is making a catastrophic season-ending and potentially career-ending mistake. Let's just address the elephant in the room. This isn't merely about Dillon Gabriel's struggles anymore. This has become a referendum on Kevin Stefanski. This is about his credibility as a head coach evaporating in real time right before our eyes. His refusal to adapt, his stubborn, blind loyalty toward a clearly struggling player, his apparent inability to recognize the obvious solution sitting right there on his bench. These decisions are not just costing his team games, they are destroying his reputation league-wide. Other coaching colleagues around the league are privately questioning his judgment, wondering what on earth he is thinking. Front office executives in other cities are looking at the Browns and wondering whether he has lost his locker room completely. A cardinal sin for a head coach. Stefanski's post-game press conference became an instant legendary meme in and of itself, a masterclass in delusional coach speak. A reporter doing his job asked him directly, "Have you considered playing Shedeur Sanders given the offense's ongoing severe struggles?" Stefanski's response, delivered with a completely straight face without a hint of irony, was, "Dillon gives us the best chance of winning." Twitter exploded instantly. That single demonstrably false quote became the rallying cry for a frustrated, betrayed fan base demanding a coaching change. One fan edited the clip of him saying it and added a sitcom laugh track which now has over 1 million views. Another set it to circus music. The mockery was relentless, merciless, and absolutely brutally deserved. And now take a step back and consider the broader implications of this madness. The Browns have constructed a championship caliber roster at almost every single position except for the most important one on the field. They have elite defensive talent at all 3 levels. They have quality offensive weapons. They have a solid, well-paid offensive line. Their special teams are performing adequately. Everything necessary for a deep, legitimate playoff run exists on this team, except for competent quarterback play. Gabriel's severe limitations are handcuffing the entire operation, turning a high-performance sports car into a golf cart. Meanwhile, the potential solution, the key to unlocking it all, sits on the bench, inactive, while the season deteriorates at an alarming rate. And you can bet your last dollar the Pittsburgh fans are enjoying this situation immensely. Their social media accounts have been flooding Cleveland's pages with mocking, trolling messages. "Thanks for the easy win," one Steelers supporter wrote. Another said, "Please, Please keep starting Gabriel. Sincerely, the entire AFC North. The rivalry has only intensified because Cleveland's own internal dysfunction has handed a division opponent precious momentum while simultaneously destroying their own playoff aspirations. This defeat wasn't just a loss. This was a season-defining disaster, one that could potentially eliminate Cleveland from serious contention before Thanksgiving even arrives. The national narrative has shifted dramatically overnight. In the preseason, analysts were seriously considering the Browns as potential dark horse contenders for the Super Bowl. Now they're the butt of every joke. A case study in organizational dysfunction, coaching incompetence, and tragically wasted defensive talent. Cleveland has once again, after a brief respite, become the league's laughingstock. Another promising season derailed by another quarterback disaster. Another year wasted. This brings us to the uncomfortable, unavoidable truth that the Cleveland organization must now confront in the mirror. Dillon Gabriel represents the sunk cost fallacy personified. The organization invested draft capital in him. They handed him the starting job, and they publicly, forcefully committed to him. Now they are watching that investment fail in spectacular, humiliating fashion. But they are refusing to admit their mistake, continuing to throw good money after bad, doubling down on a losing hand, and all the while a better, more talented, more exciting option sits right there, available, ready, and eager for the opportunity to save them from themselves. This is organizational stubbornness, destroying a competitive season for no logical, defensible reason. The Twitter discourse on Monday morning was absolutely merciless. One of the top trending hashtags in the entire country was to start Shedeur. Another was Gabriel gotta go. Cleveland's entire social media landscape has transformed into a unified, powerful anti-Gabriel movement. Fans are creating mock trade proposals, sending him to the Canadian Football League for a bag of footballs. Others are designing missing posters for the Browns offense featuring Gabriel's picture with the caption, "Last seen checking it down," and the creativity has been impressive. The anger has been palpable and the message has been unmistakable. The city of Cleveland demands a quarterback change, and they demand it immediately. Some fans have gone even further, organizing digital protests. Thousands have changed their social media profile pictures to images of Shedeur Sanders in a Browns uniform. Others have coordinated mass tweeting campaigns directed at the Browns' official accounts, spamming every post with calls to bench Gabriel. Fan podcasts have dedicated entire emergency episodes to dissecting Gabriel's failures and advocating for Shedeur's immediate promotion. This is not a fringe movement. This is not a vocal minority. This is the overwhelming majority of the Browns fan base united behind a single desperate, righteous demand. Play Shedeur Sanders. Now, the Browns organization, whether they like it or not, faces a critical decision point, a crossroads that will define their franchise for the next 5 years. They can continue to support their struggling quarterback, plug their ears, and risk losing the locker room completely while they watch the season deteriorate beyond the point of salvation. Or they can show some humility, admit they made a mistake, give Shedeur Sanders the opportunity he has so clearly earned, and potentially rescue a competitive season that is hanging by the thinnest of threads. The clock is ticking, their division rivals are gaining ground, the playoff window is closing rapidly. This isn't an unfortunate circumstance anymore. This is coaching malpractice. It's an organizational failure of the highest order. It is a complete and total disconnect between the team's leadership and cold, hard, undeniable reality. The Pittsburgh loss crystallized everything that Brown supporters have feared for months. Their team lacks a quarterback capable of winning meaningful games. Their coaching staff refuses to make the necessary changes, and their season is spiraling uncontrollably. While the obvious solution sits right there in plain sight, watching, waiting, one question and one question only remains. How long before the Cleveland Browns organization finally acknowledges the obvious truth that everyone else in the entire world, the fans, the media, the players, even their rivals already recognizes? This season was supposed to be about the Browns' resurgence. Instead, it's becoming another quarterback disaster, another wasted year, another national embarrassment, all because the coaching staff refuses to make the one glaringly obvious decision that could save them all. What do you think? How much longer can Stefanski possibly wait? Is the season already over? Drop your thoughts, your frustrations, your demands in the comments below. And if you're tired of the official narratives and want the real unfiltered story, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications because this Cleveland catastrophe is far from over and you won't want to miss what happens next. The future of this franchise, the fate of this season, hangs in the balance, and the world is watching to see if the Browns will finally get out of their own way. We'll be here to break down every single disastrous and potentially redemptive moment. Don't go anywhere.